welcome to our program. We're here with Dr. George Malnati, board-certified veterinary surgeon. He has been in practice 38 years, amazingly, and he is here to share his secrets with you on his career development, his success, and some of the do's and don'ts in what happens when you grow. George, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here, let me tell you. It's a lot we want to learn today about some of the pitfalls and some of the things you've done. I want to start off with the beginning. Where did you get the impulse to become a vet? Where did it all start?
When I was a very young child, probably about 6, my dad was a veterinarian. We had a farm. I grew up working with all sorts of animals, and I just loved it. And then I found I had a propensity towards science and just loved it. And people ask, well, why did you become a veterinarian? You could have been a physician. I said, no, thank you. I love animals. I love science. And it just melded together as I grew up. So it's a wonderful, wonderful profession.
Yeah, was it a pretty distinct decision on your part to make that happen?
Yeah, no question about it. This is what I wanted to do.
That's awesome. That's great. How old were you when you knew that? Where was that date-wise, you think?
Date-wise, it would have been around 1952 when I was 6.
Wow, that's early on. Wow.
Yeah.
Where'd you get your degree from?
Cornell.
Awesome. And what was that? Where in Cornell in New York?
Right. Cornell is in Ithaca, New York.
You went north, or you?
No, I was originally from Western Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
And I went to Williams College there, and then I went to Cornell Veterinary School in Ithaca, New York. I had one of those lucky things that happened to help me get in was that in high school there was a local group they were recruiting people for Cornell undergraduate. So I went there. I really wasn't all that interested in the program, and I got somebody to give me a ride up to the vet school. And being a brass teenager, I just walked into the dean's office, and he's standing there talking to his secretary, and I said, "Hi, are you the dean?" He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Well, I want to be a veterinarian." So we sat down and we talked, and here, 4 years later, I'm applying to vet school, and they got this little index card saying, "You were here back in such and such, and you said you want to be a veterinarian." So it's very important when you're for looking at the different applicants to vet school. Are these people in it because they want to make a lot of money, or do they really love animals? Or is it just kind of, well, this is how other people are doing it, I'm doing it? But they could see that I was interested from a small child, so it really helped.
Sure, that's awesome. Wow. So they had no doubt about you, I guess, at that point.
No.
Where'd you get started in practice? You finished school, and where do you jump in?
I went back to Massachusetts. I practiced for a few years there, and I built up a clinic there. Got kind of overwhelmed in trying to make it go.
Did you start your own clinic right away?
Well, I took over my dad's practice. He was doing lots of large animal stuff, and I just took over the local practice. Then he moved to South Carolina and took our cows with him, which was fine. The cows do much better in the South than running around in the snow. So I was frustrated by what I was running into.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, the solution is that I'm going to become a specialist. I always wanted to be a surgeon, so I really worked very hard so I could end up getting a residency. It was tough to do it after usually they would take their intern because they're familiar with it, but I was able to work my way into so that the University of Georgia accepted me. So that's how I moved to Georgia.
Oh, I see. Okay, great. So in taking over that practice, this is in really the beginning of your career. You were having to run the practice, do the surgery, do all the veterinary general work. What was that like at that time for you as a new graduate, really?
Interesting. It's a bit overwhelming to learn as you go along. I bring dogs and cats into the hospital and say, I got to do a few tests, take them in and get out the books, and try to figure out what was going on. And the small animal practice started to build up okay. Of course, the large animal practice was declining just because farm. I went back there for my 50th college reunion a few years back, and there's one farm that's 20 miles away that was still working.
Wow.
So even at that point, it was declining. I also found it very hectic to try to be handling the large animal emergencies at 5 o'clock in the morning and then still getting large animal ones at 11 at night.
Right.
So,
were you feeling the pressure of that side of the practice, the large animal side, declining? Was it a necessity to build up the small?
Yes, it was, but I enjoyed the small. I knew it was going because I'd grown up in the area, and I watched the small farms go out.
Sure. So at that point, you're managing some staff. right? And it's not a big operation yet, but
I might say they were managing me.
Okay.
Okay. This is one of my basic problems when I was trying to run a practice.
What was the story there? Tell me about that.
Well, they were very independent, and you want them to do something, and they'd go off and do something else, and you. How do you respond? Well, I responded by introverting. That certainly didn't get the job done. So it was frustrating to do it that way. But not knowing how to do it, I was never trained in business. It was just okay. I watched my dad. Well, he was real successful, but he ran like a wild man and didn't have many employees. And I'm trying to build it up, but each time I would add somebody, I would invariably get someone that wasn't quite right.
Yeah. Did he have the time to stop and teach you like to run it, or was it just on your own kind of?
Pretty much on my own. He taught me from early on as far as how he did finances and that sort of thing. But as far as actually running a practice, he was a solo practitioner, and he just ran it by it came along, he handled it. That was it.
Yeah. All right. So fast forward, you go to Georgia. You're now opening from scratch at that point?
No, I did my residency.
Yeah.
And then I decided that I was going to teach orthopedics, but found that I didn't really fit in the academic mold.
Yeah.
So I just bought a practice in Georgia. It was a small 1,200 square foot building. It was set on the outskirts of town. And it was a great place to take over. It was a relatively busy practice, even though the way I did it would differ as I got into it.
What was the transition like for you from the old doc to you? Was it smooth and easy? Was it challenging?
No, it was pretty easy.
Okay.
I had been, if you're living in the town a while, for a few years, even though you're not actually dealing with a lot of the public, but the pet-owning public get to know your name to some degree. And then that doctor was very good on telling people that, you should continue to come here.
Sure.
So.
And that was a small place, but at some point you realized it had to grow, right? It had to do better.
Well, what happened was the same. I brought my problems with me, It was, okay, I've got employees. They're running me. And I'd go do something. No, well, I'll have to do something else. And it just was...
Same story.
Same story. Somehow the problem was with me, I ultimately found out. So it grew a little bit, and it was okay. But the net wasn't very high, and it wasn't growing anywhere near as fast as I really wanted it to. I had the dreams of doing, great growth in this stuff, and somehow I just wasn't capable of doing it here. I was also a diplomate or board certified in companion animal medicine as well. There was a new board that came out at that point. So I was board certified in 2 specialties. And still, I had the skill, but I sure wasn't creating what I wanted to create.
Got it. So still limited by the basic problems of a practice.
Right.
Right.
Total lack of business. Even though I thought I'd studied business and I knew about it because I used to read all these different journals and stuff. Gotcha. But I never really had what I needed.
Gotcha. Now, for you at that time, was that a situation that created pressure for you, or were you just kind of accepting it as it was? Or how were you feeling at that time about the situation? I
felt horrible. It was like... this huge weight on your shoulders of, am I ever going to be a success? I raised my skill level very high, and it was a general practice, not just a referral practice. Sure. I did some referrals. And, the same as any other veterinarian who's struggling to get along. You can get it up to a certain level, but then it becomes overwhelming. How can I push it up higher? How do I get new clients? How do I keep the clients that I have? What is there out there? So I started to hunt for it.
Got it. And how many hours were you working at that time? What was a week like for you?
I wasn't open on Saturdays, but I still saw a lot of emergencies. So it was probably a 50, 60-hour week.
Got it. So you were working a lot. Not the practice you wanted yet at all.
Yes.
And you carrying the stress of all of that, trying to figure it out.
You got it.
I got it. And most guys I know in veterinary medicine, eventually this starts to become the family life challenge because you're gone a lot. And of course, if somebody calls and it's a crisis, you got to be there. Was that stress impacting on your family?
Oh, tremendous. I mean, I'd been divorced twice, and it certainly was a portion of it. There's all sorts of other reasons that went on as well. But
Sure.
the stress of the business, just, of course, this is, you're going to go do something. You promise to go do something with your family, and then, oops, sorry, calls. I'm not at the practice where, besides being responsible for my clients, it's also not at the point of the finances are so well secured that you can neglect to do somebody or just decline it. You can't do that.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. So when did you seek business training? At what point did you decide you were going to, okay, this has to change?
No, it was June 1986.
Yeah.
I said, I've had it. I got to find an answer. This is a disaster. And so I started to look at the different types of business training that might be out there for veterinarians. I'd gone to lots of seminars, and I knew there were some consultants. Seminars alone don't do it. You really have to get trained to use a specific system of business management that works. And sure, you go to a meeting and you come back and, oh, that's great, we'll put this in for a few days. And the staff, I'm sure, snickering in the background saying, don't worry, he'll get over it.
Right. Exactly. And what did you do? So by training, you mean something that's going to give you some form of change of habit as opposed to just, there's some great ideas there. How do I do that?
Yeah, it's a question of you're able as a veterinarian. Obviously, you can be a veterinarian without being able, but you don't have the right tools. So you have to learn the right tools. You only have certain tools that you do surgery in, and you've got to do a physical exam in a certain way. Well, you might need to do a physical exam on your practice. What's going on? What's going right and what's going wrong? Okay,
Yeah.
you look at the dog and you know what the normal is, and you can pick out what the abnormal is. Well, you don't know what the normal. I didn't know what the normal was, so I had to get trained in how to actually figure out. Okay, this is where the practice is. It's really, you got all these problems, and up to here, which is what would be perfect for your practice.
Sure, makes sense.
So I just looked for business training and learned.
So you got some early training on business analysis, veterinary practice analysis, and you could see what was going on. What did you see right off the bat with your practice? I know at that level you weren't happy with it. What did you see?
That's about the worst, terrible, most awful practice manager in the world. That's what I discovered.
That's what you saw.
Yeah, I didn't know how to hire employees properly. I didn't know how to train them properly. The employees were running me. Everything was very inefficient because they were doing things the way that they thought they ought to do, and they really didn't pay much attention to what I wanted to get done. And I didn't know how to get new clients in.
Sure.
You name it, that a normal business should be doing, I wasn't doing.
Sure. So talk about one of the first things you started to do to turn that ship around. What happened initially? What did you implement? What did you do?
Well, the first thing is that I actually found out by asking clients what they really wanted. And then I promoted on that basis. One of the little pearls is that you can't just sit there, because as a business, you're as alive as you can communicate. And if you just sit there and do nothing, people don't know you're there. So I learned to get out into, I went to different community meetings and I could talk. I spoke at joined Kiwanis Club and did different things that would put me out there as something other than a veterinarian and got my name out. And I know that was very odd at that point for any veterinarian to promote. It was very looked down on. Now everybody is promoting. But the difference is that they don't necessarily know how to promote correctly. And you have to really find out what they want and then promote that to the clients. And then you will start to bring in the type of clients you want, because you don't want just to get a large flow of lots of clients, because you're going to get the low-level clients. You rate them any way you want, but you got the low ones that you really don't want to deal with. You want the people who really care, who are going to do what they want for their pets. And you can make it go with that once you learn how to do it.
Sure. So you actually, you were doing market research, really. What are people looking for? So you knew where to promote to and what to promote to.
Exactly.
And at that point, what was the impulse to do that? I mean, were you just driven by the necessity to just get this thing going?
Yeah.
It sounds like it was out of character for you to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, are you kidding me? It was horrible. It was like, what? I'm a doctor. I don't have to do like any other business. People should just flood to me. And then to actually face that this is what I have to do,
Right.
I had to go through an awful lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Not too many tears, but a lot of blood and sweat so that I could finally feel comfortable with doing that. But once it started to work, it was, oh, well, this is easy and this is correct. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I was living a life like this, my goodness gracious. Yeah, I don't know what to do. Well, open your eyes and do it properly, and you get tremendous results.
Gotcha. Okay. And then what happened with the staff thing? It sounds like at some point you started to put your foot down on staff matters and their compliance with your needs.
Yeah, exactly. It's my confidence. It goes back to me. It is my confidence in my ability to communicate with the staff, have them know what I wanted, and then to train them in their job.
Did they turn out okay, or did they all quit? What happened when you started really facing it all?
This is always interesting. The really good ones stayed and said, this is a great program. Those guys that were complaining behind your back and causing trouble, I can't stand this. He's changed. And they left. Oh. And funny thing, when they would leave, the business would grow. So I think every practice and every business probably has some people in there who are there just to kind of knock you down, and that's the game that they want to play. But as soon as you start to do things from a point of authority and wearing your job, doing your job as an executive, these people tend to say, oh, they're going to discover me, and off they go.
Putting controls in.
Yeah, that's great.
And demanding that things get done. And then you now have to hire at this point. If you go back, some people quit. How did that go? Were you equipped for that, or did you get some help with that?
Oh, of course. I got a lot of help with that. I mean, you have to really know how to do the interview properly. You have to know how to write the ad properly, so you pull on people who want to work and enjoy what they're doing. The personal interview is really important. We do some testing, so we see what their actual IQ is and what their attitude towards life is. The personal interview, I put a lot on the personal interview.
So you were, the questions, obviously there's all kind of questions you can ask in an interview like that. A lot of times everybody comes with a great glowing resume, as we all know. They're a miracle from birth per the resume. Well, what did you cut? How do you cut through the fog in an interview? What did you do differently to get the right people outed?
Well, I really get into communication with a person so I can try to cut through this perfect veneer. And then I like to ask, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time? What do you like to create? Well, the person says, well, I'd like to sit there and just watch TV. Okay. You probably want to watch TV if you're working for me too. The person who says, well, I really like to hike. I like to get out and swim a lot. I like to walk with my dog a lot. And I like to have fun with my family. And I like to create things. I create when I get my kids have birthday parties. I like to create a wonderful cake for them and really create a fun party. Okay, so this means that person's really out there and they want to make something of something. If they're going to create something, then they're going to want to create the job here. And with proper training, then they're going to come on and become an excellent employee.
They're going to be on the right channel in the practice with training.
Yeah.
So you had backdoor questions initiative, looking for the guy who can
you betcha.
Start it and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ask, do you really get up and go in the morning and you're ready to go? Oh, yes, I really do that. And right away, that's not the case, right?
Right.
So I ask for specific examples of what they do.
So you got your team together at some point, obviously. You got some of the people left. You have the team now. Talk about what happened as you went up the mountain, because now you're talking about really working more or working more quickly in some way to keep that revenue base rising, right?
That's right.
What was that like?
Well, we promoted properly. I had to have more staff, more veterinary staff, not so much the technical staff because they became more efficient. And then I actually added 2 veterinarians at one point. And in order to do, this is another really key point, is that I was successful in what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote down how I actually approached everything. And then it's how my practice is. And so that they could take over some of my clients. You do it the same way I do. And I found out that those 2 veterinarians, one did great, and went on to be a very successful veterinarian even after I sold that practice. And the other one didn't duplicate what I had written down, and he just didn't do anywhere near as well, even though he was a very bright veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
So it's passing on exactly how successful you are, and it's not just the actions as a veterinarian, but it's also how you communicate and deal with people.
Yeah.
So that allowed them almost duplicate myself professionally, and that allowed the practice to grow that way. And I got to the point where I could have 2 or 3 veterinarians, depending on how much time I wanted to be away from the practice, because I could actually leave for months at a time and go do some interesting things that I like to do.
Sure. So you got some freedom going on.
Very much so. And I went from a 1,200 square foot facility to a 4,700 square foot facility.
Wow.
And so and then we actually had a training a room upstairs that we used for people to train in.
No kidding.
It worked very nicely.
You had scheduled training. You had training you set up.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very
wow.
And they did really well once they learned their job.
Sure.
It was interesting because in the early stages you're always hunting for money. You know, how can I afford this? How can you do that? Well, I might need to buy that car so I can look professional, which is the wrong thing to do. We were very successful. So I went to my banker and I wanted to expand my business. I knew him fairly well. And so I'd written out everything in great detail of how I was going to do it. And I went in to sit down and said, hey, I want to add on my building. He says, sure, no problem. And I'm sitting there. My jaw, he says, oh, what are you sitting there for, George? I said I'd do it. What, you were waiting for the interest rate? And I couldn't quite tell him that it was like running up and trying to push through a really tough door, and someone opens it and you fall flat on your face. But he says, I like what this stuff that you're doing has done for your business.
Wow. And they saw your numbers, obviously, in your
that's why.
applications.
Yeah,
sure.
The applications and looked at my bank account. I banked with them.
So you have a multi-million-dollar practice going on up there, and I don't think the town you're in is that big, right? It's not a.
It was about 100,000.
Yeah,
college town.
There you go. Yeah, college is up there.
Yeah.
And you're gotten time off now. You're to the point where you can take off time. You got some vets to cover, and you're still board certified. So obviously you're a guy to go to in surgical needs. And then at some point, you decided to come to Florida, where you are now. So that practice, you sold that?
I sold that, and then I moved here. And I was tired of doing veterinary medicine. I was tired of it, right? Which was
took a sabbatical.
I took a sabbatical,
and could afford to do, like a lot of guys can't.
That's true.
Yeah.
And then I was here for about 3 years, and a friend asked me to do hip surgery on their cat. So I did that at a local vet's clinic. I came home smiling for the first time in 3 years.
Wow.
So that was 2002.
Driving in the right lane again.
Oh, yeah. So one of those amazing things. I didn't want to build a huge monster practice. I just wanted to practice medicine. I could manage easily, but I just wanted to have my own little practice and just do nothing but surgery. So I open up the American Veterinary Journal, the AVMA journal, and I open it up, and there's an area code where we live. And it was, you got to be kidding me. And so I'd been driving past, even though I wasn't practicing, I kept driving past this place, and that's a good location. You just, as a vet, even if you're not working, you still see all the veterinary clinics around.
You're still thinking about it.
So that was a clinic. It's a great location.
Wow.
And so it's it's only 1,600 square feet. I do nothing but surgery, just 2 major surgeries a day, work Monday through Friday and see my surgical patients on Saturday. I use the exact same business model to build it up and train my employees and hire the correct employees.
Yeah.
And it's just boomed. I'm booked out for surgery for the next 3 weeks.
It's great.
So.
Yeah, it's great that you were able to, retire early as you chose to and elect to go back into practice because you want to and practice in the style you want to. I think a lot of people out there who are listening who are in the middle of their situation that they're trying to push away from themselves and get control of can, know that that's not a freedom they have right now. What would you tell them? I mean, people listening to this is you're 38 years now, right?
I don't count that high.
But what would you tell somebody who is in the middle of it? You know, they might have a $300,000-$400,000 practice. They don't have an associate, or they have had some and that hasn't gone right, and they've just sort of stuck there. They don't have the freedom or necessarily the income to have the freedom. What would you tell them to do? What would you tell them to start? Where's their starting point at?
Well, I find a lot of veterinarians are in that situation. And I really like to help my fellow veterinarians. So, they need to be trained and learn how to run it as a business. Mm-hmm. But you have to deal with people who actually know how a veterinary practice works, so that you can help you implement all the things that you need to implement. Yeah, and you can train, you can learn. The stuff is there, and all the data is there. You just have to study it and then apply it. That's all there is to it. It's just like you learn how to do a surgery, and you're going to do a spay right or a tumor removal. You're going to do it the same way every time, mm-hmm. because you know that works. So this is a business technique, shows you exactly how you're supposed to do it. You do it like this every time, mm-hmm. and you're going to get a specific result. So back to school a little bit. Yeah, because you could spend your whole life and go off and get an MBA or something, but if you're sitting there and you got a family to feed, you can't take off and do that. It's really not necessarily applicable to veterinary medicine. MBAs tend to train you for the corporate world. This isn't a corporation. That's professional practice. It's a professional practice. Yeah. And one of the things that it's very important to realize that, because today, those of us, or I don't care so much about me because I have all the knowledge there, but my fellow practitioners often are worried about the corporate takeover of veterinary medicine. But the fact is that we, as individuals, are much more flexible than a corporation. You talk to people working for the corporations, they can't make decisions on their own. They have to do it this way. And, well, there's not a lot of fun in that as far as I can see. Business training, they can go on and really have a very large practice, very efficient practice, and compete extremely well and beat the daylights out of these corporate practices. Yeah. They're really not hard to compete against. You just have to learn how to run your business, and boom, you got it knocked. Sure, and there's plenty of business out there to do. There's no question about that. Oh, it's incredible amount, and they want the personal care. Yeah, this is it. This is what our strength as small practitioners is, that owners, their family, and they just love their baby, and they as long as they know that you understand that relationship and you take excellent care of them, take care of the client as well as their baby, then you can grow very, very large as long as you continue to, again, as I did in my other practice, have them duplicate what you do successfully, what your personality is. It's not just what you do mechanically, it's your relationship with the clients. Yeah, help the next guy in front of you, and it grows, yeah. Cool. So today, at this point, you are doing a little legacy work, I know, and you're amongst an advisory board of 4 other very top-notch veterinarians, all have multi-million-dollar practices. Mm-hmm. And what's the work there, and what's the intent there behind all that? Well, I've gone through a rough time at different times in my profession, and I want to see my professional colleagues do really, really well. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I don't like corporate medicine. I like the individual practitioner. This is what our country is built on, is small business. Mm-hmm. And I want to encourage and help all of my colleagues. It's wonderful when you see someone who's having trouble get the correct information, and then they start to thrive. It's very, very rewarding to see that. That's why I'm doing this. Awesome. And that group is going to be following up with business training as well for vets, and that's going to be the real solution for them. Absolutely. Great. That is the solution. Great. Well, George, it's been great talking to you today. I appreciate you taking this effort and time. It's something you don't have to do, but I know you're doing it from the heart. So again, we thank you for this interview, and I hope people watching see the value in it and your intention to do exactly what you're talking about. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. I'm glad to help.